The air in Otu-Eke was heavy with tension that morning. The sun rose as it always did, casting its golden glow over the village, but the people's faces were clouded with worry. Adebayo, the wealthiest trader in the community, was gone, and so was the village's wealth. "He took everything," whispered Mama Nkechi, her voice trembling. "The grain, the gold, even the hopes of the children." Adebayo was not just any trader. He was charismatic, sharp-tongued, and had an eye for opportunity. When he spoke, people stopped to listen, like the time he convinced Papa Uche, the most skeptical farmer in Otu-Eke, to trade his surplus yams for exotic spices. "Trust me," Adebayo had said, flashing his disarming smile. "These spices will fetch triple their worth at market." Papa Uche had laughed skeptically, shaking his head. "You think you can fool me, young man," he had said. But Adebayo's grin widened. "Not fool you, Papa Uche, guide you. Let's make your hard work pay off." Sure enough, the spices sold as promised, leaving Papa Uche speechless and the villagers in awe. From the moment he arrived in Otu-Eke 5 years earlier, he had transformed the local market. The once quiet stalls now buzzed with life, filled with goods the villagers had never seen. Exquisite fabrics shimmering under the sun, spices that carried the scent of distant lands, and tools that seemed to work like magic. The air around Adebayo was electric, as if prosperity itself followed in his shadow. The villagers trusted him. Slowly but surely, they began to deposit their savings with him. "It's safer with me," Adebayo would say, leaning in as though sharing a secret. "I'll make your money grow." His confidence was infectious, and the results spoke for themselves at first. Mama Nkechi often told her neighbors, "Adebayo is a blessing to this village," her face beaming with hope. The trust they placed in him felt unshakable until it wasn't. Then, one fateful night, he vanished. His one-room apartment by the market square, always bustling with activity, was eerily silent. The usual chatter of customers and the clinking of coins were replaced by an unsettling stillness. The villagers, uneasy, gathered outside as the moon cast a pale light on the scene. The door hung slightly open, creaking softly in the night breeze. Inside, the shelves were empty, the goods gone, and the faint, acrid smell of burnt paper lingered in the air. "His ledgers!" cried Mama Nkechi, holding up the charred remains. "All gone!" Fear spread quickly through the village. Children held their mothers tightly, and men looked at each other worriedly. Papa Chukudi yelled, "Where is he?" His voice was shaking with anger as he hit his fist on the burned doorframe. "He's taken everything from us." People in the crowd started whispering to each other. "Can he really do this to us?" Someone asked quietly. Another person answered loudly, "We trusted him completely." Mama Nkechi began to cry and sat down on the ground. "What's going to happen to us now?" she said very softly, as others around her started crying loudly. For weeks, the villagers searched, their desperation growing with each passing day. "Send word to every nearby town," demanded Papa Chukudi, his voice sharp with frustration. Messengers on foot and horseback carried descriptions of Adebayo far and wide. The oracle priests were summoned, their shrines filled with offerings of palm oil and kola nuts. "He hides in the shadows," one priest intoned cryptically, "but shadows do not last forever." Rewards were offered too. 100 measures of grain for anyone with information, Mama Nkechi announced at the market, her voice trembling with both hope and despair. But no one came forward. The fields remained silent, the paths empty. Adebayo seemed to have disappeared into thin air, leaving only the echoes of his promises and the bitter taste of betrayal. Time passed, and the wounds left by Adebayo's betrayal grew deeper, like a cut that refused to heal. Families that once flourished now struggled to survive. The laughter of children playing in the fields was replaced by the heavy silence of despair as many dropped out of school, their futures dimmed. Husbands and wives argued late into the night, their voices sharp with the strain of empty pockets and unfulfilled promises. Marriages crumbled, and the village's once vibrant spirit felt suffocated under the weight of loss. The name Adebayo became a curse on everyone's lips. "If the gods are just, he will not know peace," muttered Papa Uche, his weathered hands trembling as he tightened his grip on a rusted hoe. Mama Nkechi, her eyes hollow with exhaustion, spat on the ground whenever she heard his name. "He's stolen more than our money," she would say bitterly. "He's stolen our dreams." At night, villagers sat around dying fires, whispering their anger and sorrow. "Do you think he ever thinks of us?" asked young Ada, her voice trembling. "Or does he sleep soundly in his stolen wealth?" The elders shook their heads grimly. "Justice will find him," they said. "One way or another, it always does." 3 years had passed since Adebayo disappeared, but the pain he caused in Otu-Eke still hurt. Life went on, but people couldn't forget how he betrayed them. It seemed like they would never find him, when a strange rumor started spreading. At first, it was just a quiet whisper from travelers and traders passing through the village. But soon, the whispers grew louder and clearer. "He lives a life of luxury," said a trader sitting under the village's only mango tree. "They call him Oluwole now, but from what people say, it has to be Adebayo. He's in the faraway city of Ayetoro, surrounded by fine clothes, gold jewelry, and servants. No ordinary trader gets that rich." The villagers looked at each other uncomfortably, the words sinking deep into their hearts. Nena, the oldest widow, held her walking stick and slowly got up from her stool. Her voice was weak with age, but it had a sharp edge. "We must find him," she said firmly, her dark eyes shining with determination. "He can't escape punishment." A low noise spread through the small crowd. Nena's words brought back old anger, making it feel fresh and hurtful again. People remembered how Adebayo had lied to them and disappeared with money meant to help the whole village. Nkem, the blacksmith, stood up, clenching his fists. "If the rumors are true, he's living a rich life while we struggle. How could he do this to us after everything we did for him?" Others agreed with him. It wasn't just the stolen money that hurt. It was that one of their own villagers had betrayed them. The next morning, the villagers met in the village square. Under the big branches of an old Iroko tree, they discussed what to do next. The air was tense, and the heat made everyone feel uncomfortable. "We must be careful," said Olamide, the palm wine tapper. "If we rush into Ayetoro without proof, we might cause trouble with the city people." "Careful?" Nkem shouted. "He didn't care when he left us with nothing." The two men glared at each other, getting angrier, until Nena hit the ground with her cane. "Stop!" she shouted, making everyone quiet. She looked at each villager and spoke calmly. "We need a plan. If Adebayo, or Oluwole, is living in Ayetoro, we must make sure it's true before we do anything. Who will go and find out?" The crowd fell silent, eyes darting nervously. Ayetoro was far, a bustling city full of strangers and dangers. Finally, a young man named Chijioke stepped forward. He was one of the few in the village who had traveled far before. "I'll go," he said, his tone quiet but firm. "I'll find out if the rumors are true." A wave of relief washed over the villagers. The worry lingered in their faces. Chijioke's mother, Ada, pulled him aside before he left. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the satchel slung over his shoulder. "Be careful, my son," she whispered. "Cities like Ayetoro are not kind to those from places like ours." Chijioke nodded, though his stomach churned with nerves. He promised his mother he would return, then set off down the dusty road, the weight of the village's hopes heavy on his shoulders. The journey was long and grueling, the road winding through dense forests and open plains. By the time Chijioke reached Ayetoro, the sun was setting, casting the city in a golden glow. The sight was overwhelming. Streets crowded with people, market stalls bursting with goods, and buildings taller than any in Otu-Eke. He had never seen such wealth and chaos in one place. Chijioke started searching carefully. He asked questions at the markets, listened secretly to conversations in taverns, and kept listening for anyone mentioning Oluwole. Many days passed without finding much, but then, in a dark corner of a busy inn, he heard a drunk merchant bragging about a rich trader. Oluwole? Ha! That man has a golden touch, the merchant slurred, slamming his cup on the table. Came out of nowhere, he did. Now he throws coins around like they grow on trees. Chijioke's heart pounded as he edged closer, pretending to study the menu. The merchant leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Rumor is, he wasn't always called Oluwole. Some say he's hiding something, but who cares, eh? He's rich, and that's all that matters. The confirmation sent a chill through Chijioke. It had to be Adebayo. He quickly left the inn, his mind racing. The villagers needed to know, but the risk of confronting Adebayo alone was too great. He would return to Otu-Eke first, where together they could decide the next move. The journey home felt even longer than the way there. As Chijioke approached the village, weary and dusty from travel, he saw the people gathering in the square, waiting anxiously. Nena stepped forward, her sharp eyes narrowing as she studied his face. Well? She asked, her voice taut with expectation. Chijioke took a deep breath, steadying himself. It's him, he said simply. Oluwole is Adebayo. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The anger that had simmered for 3 years now boiled over. Nkem's voice rang out above the others. Then we must go to Ayetoro and bring him back. He cannot be allowed to get away with this. Nena raised her hand, silencing the crowd. Patience, she said firmly. We will act, but we will act wisely. The villagers nodded, their resolve hardening. The time for justice had come. Adebayo's days of hiding were numbered. A small group of villagers gathered at the edge of their village, looking determined. Eze, a brave hunter, stood in the middle. He had his bow and arrows with him. The villagers chose him to lead because he was very courageous and had excellent instincts. 4 others stood with him. Nena, an elderly woman who insisted on joining. Nkem, the strong blacksmith. Chijioke, the young man who had confirmed the rumors in Ayetoro. And Amara, a quiet but fierce woman with a sharp mind and a sharp knife. Are we ready? Eze asked, his voice steady but low, as if to keep the weight of the mission contained. We are, Nena replied, gripping her walking stick as though it were a weapon. The group started their long and uncertain trip with very little food or water. The road ahead was very long, going through big forests and open fields. They walked for many days under the hot sun. The dust from the road stuck to their skin, and at night they sat around small fires, eating very little because their food was running out. This isn't just about the money he stole, Nkem said one evening, breaking a tense silence. It's about the trust. He was one of us. Amara poked the fire with a stick, her expression hard. He won't talk his way out of this, not this time. Eze nodded but said nothing. His sharp eyes scanned the dark forest beyond their campsite, his hand never far from his bow. The weather turned against them as they traveled farther. Torrential rain soaked them to the bone, and they shivered through cold, sleepless nights. Food became scarcer, and tempers flared under the strain. Are we even going the right way? Nkem snapped one afternoon, his voice heavy with frustration. For all we know, he's already moved on. Chijioke bristled at the comment. I saw him in Ayetoro, he said firmly. We're on the right path. Enough. Eze cut in, his tone sharp. We won't get anywhere if we tear each other apart. Save your energy. The group's determination was tested many times, but they kept going. They were motivated by the memory of how Adebayo had hurt them and their hope for justice. When they finally arrived at the edge of Ibadan, the big city looked overwhelming. The streets were noisy and crowded, with vendors shouting, children running around, and carts making a lot of noise on the stone roads. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The group stayed close together as they made their way through the crowded streets. They looked around at all the new faces. The markets were bright and loud, with many stalls selling spices, clothes, and shiny things that sparkled in the sun. But even with all the excitement of the city, they felt small and didn't quite fit in. Then they saw him. At first it was just a glimpse, a man stepping out of a grand building, dressed in fine robes that shimmered in the light. He carried himself with an air of confidence, his laughter rising above the noise of the street. But there was no mistaking him. The face they had once known so well, now fuller and framed by a neatly trimmed beard, belonged to Adebayo. That's him, Chijioke whispered, his voice taut with emotion. The group froze, their eyes fixed on the man who had once been part of their village. He looked nothing like the boy they had grown up with. The humble Adebayo was gone, replaced by Oluwole, a man surrounded by wealth and luxury. Look at him, Nena muttered, her voice trembling with anger. Living as if he's done no wrong. Eze's jaw tightened as he studied Adebayo from a distance. We need to be smart, he said. We can't just walk up to him and accuse him, not here. Amara nodded, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. We'll watch him, learn his movements. If we act without thinking, we could lose everything. For days they followed him through the city, careful to keep their distance. Adebayo, or Oluwole as he was now called, moved with ease through the bustling streets, greeting merchants and dignitaries alike. He spent lavishly, tossing coins as if they were worthless. The contrast between his life and the struggles of the village was a bitter pill to swallow. One evening, as the group gathered in a quiet alley to plan their next move, Nkem's frustration boiled over. What are we waiting for? We know it's him. Let's confront him and end this. And then what? Eze countered, his voice low but firm. Do you think the city guards will stand by and let us drag him away? No. We need proof. We need a way to bring him back to Otu-Eke without causing a scene. Nena, who had been silent, spoke up. He thinks he's safe here. That's his weakness. We'll use it against him. The group became quiet, thinking deeply about what was said. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they also knew they couldn't go back to their village without getting what they came for. They started making a plan that would require them to be brave and clever. As they got ready for what was next, Eze looked at each of them. This isn't just about punishing him, he said. It's about making sure he can't steal from anyone else again. We'll do this together. The others nodded, feeling more determined. They had come too far to give up now. No matter what, they would bring Adebayo back to face the people he had wronged. The market was busy and noisy, with smells of spices and roasted food filling the air. Sellers shouted to sell their goods, and children ran through the crowds, laughing and playing. But Eze didn't notice any of this. He was focused on the man in front of him, who wore expensive-looking clothes that shone like the sun. The man walked with pride, like a king. Eze's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped forward, his voice ringing out above the noise. Adebayo! The name sliced through the air, silencing those nearby. The man froze mid-step, his back stiffening. Slowly he turned, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Ease. For a fleeting moment, fear flashed across his face, a crack in the polished facade. But then he laughed, a hollow sound that felt as false as the name he now carried. "You must be mistaken," he said, his tone smooth but brittle. "I am Oluwole." Eze stepped closer, his voice steady but low enough to avoid drawing too much attention. "You can call yourself whatever you like, but we know who you are. You can't hide behind that name or those robes." The others emerged from the crowd, surrounding Adebayo in a loose circle. Nkem's fists clenched at his sides, his glare piercing. Amara's hand rested on the hilt of her blade, her eyes cold and sharp. Chijioke and Nena stood nearby, silent but resolute. Adebayo's gaze flicked from face to face, calculating. "You're wasting your time," he said with a smirk. "No one here knows who I was before, and no one cares. Leave now, before you embarrass yourselves." "We didn't come this far for games," Nkem growled, stepping forward. "We know what you did, and we have proof." Adebayo's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Proof? In a city like this, your words mean nothing. You're just villagers, outsiders. Go home." Nena's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "We're not leaving without justice. You can laugh all you want, Adebayo, but the truth has a way of catching up to people." Adebayo's face darkened, the confidence slipping just enough to reveal the man beneath the mask. The confrontation drew the attention of bystanders, their curious whispers swelling into a murmur that rippled through the marketplace. Among them were the city's elders, men and women of great influence, who ruled with wisdom and fairness. They stepped forward, their expressions stern as they surveyed the scene. "What is the meaning of this commotion?" one elder demanded, her voice commanding respect. Eze bowed his head slightly. "Elders, forgive the disturbance, but this man," he gestured toward Adebayo, "is a fraud. He once lived among us in Otu-Eke and betrayed our trust, stealing what was not his to take." Adebayo scoffed, lifting his chin defiantly. "These are baseless accusations. They have no proof." Eze stepped forward slowly, making sure everyone was watching him. He reached into his bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, its edges worn from being handled so much. He held it up high so everyone could see, letting the sunlight shine on the faint writing on it. The crowd murmured, curious about what he was holding. "This," Eze said, his voice calm but firm, "is a note Adebayo signed. It's the agreement he made with us, promising to multiply the savings we gave him 3 times over." He carefully unfolded the paper as if it might tear at the slightest touch and pointed to the signature at the bottom. "Look here, his name, his promise. He left this behind when he ran away. It's proof of how he betrayed us." The villagers began to murmur again, anger showing on their faces. This note wasn't just some words on paper. It was the broken trust of the whole community, written down for everyone to see. Nena stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. "And that's not all," she said, her eyes fixed on Adebayo. "We've also brought witnesses, people who knew him well, people he lied to, people he stole from." Her voice was strong, full of the pain and anger the village had carried for so long. She turned to the elders, her tone serious and firm. "Elders, we ask for your judgment and fairness. This man must answer for what he's done." The city elders, sitting in a row, exchanged quiet glances. Their faces showed nothing, but their authority was clear. Finally, the leader of the group spoke, his voice deep and steady. If what you say is true, he said slowly, we will hear the full story. Adebayo, now calling himself Oluwole, let out a fake laugh. He tried to sound confident, but there was a hint of worry in his eyes. This is ridiculous, he said, pretending to be calm. That paper doesn't prove anything. And these people? They're just villagers. Their words mean nothing here. But the elders didn't seem impressed by his words. They motioned for everyone to head to the large hall, where cases were heard officially. The villagers followed, their steps determined, and their hearts set on getting justice. They were ready to make sure Adebayo answered for what he had done. Adebayo, or Oluwole, as you call yourself now, you have deceived not only your village, but this city as well. Your ill-gotten wealth will be confiscated and returned to those you wronged. As for you, your punishment is exile. You will live the rest of your days in isolation, a reminder of the lives you have ruined. Adebayo's face turned pale, and his shoulders dropped as he felt the weight of being judged. The wealth he had held onto so tightly was taken away, leaving him an empty shell of the person he thought he had become. When the villagers returned to Otu-Eke, they brought back more than just their stolen wealth. They brought a sense of closure, though it was tinged with sadness. The trust that once bound them together was harder to rebuild, and the wounds of betrayal would take time to heal. As they gathered in the village square, Mama Nkechi, known for her wisdom and kind heart, spoke in a calm but firm voice. Adebayo taught us a hard lesson, she said. Greed is like a sickness that destroys the soul, but we must not let it destroy our hearts. Let this be a fresh start for us. The villagers nodded, letting her words sink in. They understood now how costly misplaced trust could be, but they also saw the power of their unity. Together, they would rebuild their lives and their village, stronger than they had ever been before. Although the name Adebayo would never be spoken again, the lesson he left behind would always be remembered. What would you have done if you were one of the villagers? Have you ever experienced betrayal like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to hear more gripping tales like this one. See you in the next story.